Hello everyone, welcome to Redbus US channel. Today we have a big announcement from Supreme Court. They made a major decision on the birthright citizenship that actually strikes down the Trump birthright citizenship executive order. So we'll look at what it means for all of you. Especially the employment-based immigration holders, on visas. So what to look at in this video is the background, how it reached Supreme Court, a timeline, so that you have a full understanding of the whole thing and how the case was won, right? In simple terms, what are the main things? It's a 190 plus page document. So we'll try to break it down so that it's easier for you to look at that and what it means for, especially visa holders, right? Can somebody change in the future? So all of these we'll address. If you don't subscribe to our channel, do subscribe for getting regular updates. Without further ado, let's get started. So just to give you a background, President Trump, when he took office, he signed an executive order called Protecting the Meaning of the Value of American Citizenship. We have an article on this you can read on our website, right? But essentially, in plain English, what it said was, for a US-born baby, to get citizenship, either of their parents should be either a citizen or a green card holder, and they put it in the executive order that says that if the mother is unlawfully present and the father is not a US citizen, then you won't get citizenship. Or if a mother is in a temporary visa and essentially H1B, all of these are temporary visas, or even and the father is not a US citizen or a green card holder, then they don't get it. So basically, it hit everybody. It impacted everybody technically, H1Bs, H4, F1, anybody who's on a visa or even not on a visa. It impacted quite a few of them. So there's a lot of panic. This happened last year. So just to look at the timeline, this was actually signed on Jan 20th, and then early 2025, it was actually like there was a nationwide injunction that came in, and then in June, first ruling it said that lower courts cannot give something that applies national. Then again, there was some panic, and again in July, basically then certified a class. It became a class action lawsuit, and then again it was able to block. So from January to essentially July, there was a lot of things that have been happening, and in April of this year, there was arguments on this case, and today is when we got the actual decision. So let's look at what the decision, right? So the core argument on both sides, right, like is about the subject to jurisdiction. So if you look at the 14th Amendment of American Constitution, right, what it says is that, right, all persons born in the United States are subject to the jurisdiction. The whole, basically, basically all they're trying to do is if somebody is born in the US, they are subject to the US jurisdiction. You can't just say they're not subject to the jurisdiction. Trump argument was telling that, kids are temporary in document, not fully subject to jurisdiction. And they said that citizenship should require domicile, basically a permanent home and all, and they need to have allegiance. So, and also, some of them argued that it was meant for freed slaves and not for children of modern visitors. And also they were arguing that it encourages illegal immigration, birth tourism. So these were the arguments that they put together. But the people basically who represented the families were impacted, right? So they just said that again, when somebody is subject to jurisdiction, there are only two people who are not subject to that, right? One is diplomats and people who are in war. Kids born to somebody in the war, and especially to an enemy, and they're in your country, right? So if somebody is physically present in the US, they are subject to the jurisdiction, period. That's it. And the second biggest case that was referenced, or, this was 1898 case. This was regarding, Wong Kim Ark, right? So this person was actually born in the US to Chinese parents, and then he left the country once, and he didn't have issues. Second time when he actually left the country and tried to enter, they said you're not a citizen, and that's how we entered Supreme Court. And then they gave a clear argument that anybody born to parents who are in the US, if they're born in the US, they're citizens. That's it. So that was a very, very big case. That was actually the very big one. That was probably the key one that actually made this also favorable. And there is no domicile or the parents requirement in the Constitution, so you can't really bank on that. And this is an over century law, right? I mean, millions have got it. So again, so these are the arguments that they said that you can't really just change something that's been there for so many years, and the arguments basically from Trump administration are very weak. So the 6 reasons, the families won this argument against the Trump administration in simple terms is, when the order came in, right, the Supreme Court, basically the Trump order talks about mother, father, legal, temporary status, all of these and all of this. But none of these actually appear in the Constitution. It only says you're born here and jurisdiction. That's it. If you're born here, you get it. So that is a big one. And 1898, the Kimon case already did that. So that was a big one, right? So that did that. And the government kept changing story that allegiance needed and all of that. It is different phases, but again, all of this is basically not very clear. So that also didn't really help them. And subject to jurisdiction means if you're physically in the US, even as a visitor, you must follow law. If you're following laws, means you're subject to jurisdiction, right? Think about, you are in the US, but if you don't follow laws, then you can get into trouble, right? So basically, that means you are subject to jurisdiction. So only diplomats and foreign armies are not subject to this. So basically, that is also settled there. And the old commentary, whatever the commentary given in 1880s by writers, they cannot really rewrite the constitution. That's what they said. And basically, they said that the government's birth tourism issues, they're all related to policy. That is nothing to do with the constitution. So you can't really like bring in that argument that, all of these things are happening. So these are the six key, points that were actually looked at for winning the argument. And it was actually one, basically 6-3 means six were in favor of this and three opposed this, right? Basically the Trump executive order was struck down. Six people supported it. That's what it meant. And you can read the names: Roberts, this is justices' names and all of, right. So what the court really held was all the children born to US in the US to parents who are lawfully or unlawfully or temporarily present at the birth, they're all like basically subject. They're all essentially citizens by birth. So that's the first one. And also they talk about the right of the soil, which is a wonky mark from that, right? And there is no chance of domicile allegiance, all of that, right? And so whatever was promised back then, it stuck, right? So this impact is about 250,000 babies here, could have lost this, if this really were to go the other way. So there's a big thing, right? And the second question now comes is, okay, now that this is gone, is there any other way? Can the Trump administration basically go to the Congress and change it? So they also really address this part in this opinion, right? What they said was, a simple law won't do it. As per that, what they said that no president or no ordinary lawmakers can change this. What they clearly said that is, to basically move the birthright citizenship, you need to get something called a constitutional amendment. And for constitutional amendment to happen, two-thirds of the House must propose, or two-thirds of the state must call a convention, and two-thirds of the Senate must agree to this, and three-fourths of the states must ratify, meaning 38 of the 50 states. So all of these, like basically have to happen to this. So just some person, some senator or some person trying to create a bill and then passing it in Congress won't really cut it. So it has to really go through something called a constitutional amendment, and for that to happen, all of these things have to happen. And the chances of this happening, like especially 38 or 50 states ratifying that, it's almost next to impossible in the current environment, because there are many red states, there are many blue states, all of them coming to something, right? It's going to be very, very hard. And none has happened since 1992. So it's a long, long way, right, to go, right? And so again, maybe politically people will try to do, creating new bills and all of that, but it cannot be done easily. It has a long way and probably almost impossible to get it at the current state, right? So that's why it's settled for good. Now, what does this ruling mean for H1B, L1, F1, and all the users who watch our channel, right? So if you are on H1B or H4, L1, L2, F1, J1, O1, O2, anything you call it, right? If you're on a visa, a temporary visa, doesn't matter what kind of visa, and a child is born to you, they are a US citizen by birth. That's it, period. This has been there like this for many, many years, and now it will continue to be like that. So the feared scenario was, when the baby came in, what happens? There is no citizenship. So all of that arguments are off now. So there was a lot of fear, should I have a baby here, all of that. So all of that are gone now. Now you can be rest assured there is nothing to worry. So basically this may, again, go back and forth here and there, but basically this is the final judgment that has come in and people will accept it, right? So it does not change so it's basically gives citizenship only to the people who are born, especially, or the children who are born to temporary. It doesn't really give the citizenship for the parents, right? Again, there is another process for that, right? So all in all, you don't have to worry about that. So that's taken care. So the key takeaway, the Supreme Court struck down the Trump's birthright citizenship executive order 6-3, and children born to US in the US to parents on temporary visas like H1B, all of whatever F1, all any other visas, or even not visas also are US citizens at birth. And they really reaffirmed that the 14th Amendment about the wonky mark case, saying that the domicile, all of that rejected. And for any of these things to change, it needs a constitutional amendment, which means two-thirds of the Congress have to pass and three-fourths of the states have to ratify it as well. So it's not like going to be a simple bill that will do that. So all the fear that you had for that, your kids born here will not be citizens is all gone. So this protects essentially the child citizenship. It doesn't change your status or your green card situation, all of that, right? So that's it, folks. So this has been a long waited game for this particular ruling. So it's going to relieve a lot of people waiting for this. Yeah, thank you for watching. Do subscribe for getting regular updates.